Gamers. Today I'm going to be playing crane games while voicing
I am Ironmouse.
I'm CDawgVA. I'm a content creator and voice actor on Twitch and YouTube based in Japan who loves anime. I'm also one of the hosts of the Trash Taste podcast.
I know who you are. You're that guy from the Trash Taste podcast. I think I watched one of the episodes. Don't know who the other guys were, though. Don't know what their content is like. I bet it's pretty bad content. You should get a better podcast. Just my 2 cents. Also, when you went to the Love and Host, I voted you the most entertaining, so I'm pretty much your biggest fan.
Thanks for voting for me, Mouse-chan. I appreciate you. I think you and the Trash Taste boys will get along just fine once you get past their trash takes on anime and their weird takes on food and anime, or anything really lol. I love how they call anime out on all of its flaws, but will also hype it up on its most bizarre moments. Trash Taste is definitely something else, but I am happy to call it a podcast I am a part of. Trash Taste, for all its trashiness, just hits different for me.
I appreciate that you can tolerate me, Mr. CDawgVA. To be honest, the anime takes weren't as egregious as what they were saying about Japanese food. In the video I watched, one of them ordered their steak well done with ketchup. That's a crime!
In my opinion, if you do that to a good piece of steak, well, you gotta throw the whole human away.
I agree. Ketchup on a well-done steak is atrocious. I know exactly who in the pod you are talking about. It's Joey. He has pretty awful takes on food in general, but he is from South Africa. Cut him some slack. In that case, I bet you would be very upset to know that on the recent episode of the podcast, Garnt poured mayo on top of his steak. That is something that would get a man kicked out of Japan immediately.
What the heck? Mayonnaise on a steak? This podcast is unhinged. I didn't know the bar could get lower. Are they still in Japan? The culture police should get them.
They are still in Japan right now. If you think our food takes are bad, you should see what else he has been doing. On another episode of the podcast, he puts raw sugar on vanilla ice cream and eats it with his fingers. Garnt is a menace and must be dealt with.
Raw sugar on vanilla ice cream? The council will get to the bottom of this. This cannot be allowed to continue. Who else is with the podcast? Is anyone saying, how are these 3 maniacs gathered together?
There is one man you may have a hope of resonating with in this podcast. Sydney. She has very sane food takes. However, she does have some extremely bad anime takes. She really enjoys the more smutty side of anime. You will understand what I mean if you've ever watched Redo of Healer.
Oh my god! There is no hope. This is a podcast for degenerates. I cannot possibly give my time to this podcast anymore if that is what they are watching. What is Redo of Healer about? The title sounds like a story of love. Is that wrong? It can't be wrong.
Let's just say it's about a healer who gets, revenge. You can figure out the rest. In a more serious note, Trash Taste does do episodes on less lewd topics, such as how Joey had a massive gambling addiction, or how Connor was an exchange student in Boston. So it's not all a podcast about degeneracy, but they do a fair bit of it.
I'm glad to hear that they do not solely focus on their degenerate and depraved anime recommendations. What would you say the ratio is? I hope they don't give bad recommendations too often. I'm pretty concerned with how they eat their steak and their ice cream. They might have no taste at all. I'm very glad to see that you, Mr. CDawgVA, do not engage in the same awful habits as your fellow co-hosts, though. You seem very sophisticated. What do you watch for fun other than the podcast?
Well, thank you for the compliments. And to give you an idea how bad the recommendations are, I'll give you a list of our most degenerate takes on anime in the podcast. Aeromanga Sensei is a classic. Redo of Healer is unironically good. Aeromanga Sensei is great for introducing people into anime. And that is just on the top of my head. There are many, many more awful takes.
Oh my goodness! Aeromanga Sensei is a classic? Aeromanga Sensei is a classic. Are you sure you want to associate yourself with this podcast, Mr. CDawgVA? This is an absolute disaster. Please tell me that these bad recommendations are the minority of the podcast, and most are good, well thought out, and sane anime recommendations.
Sadly, that is not the case. A lot of the times it is quite the opposite, especially when it comes to the more NSFW section of anime. Garnt recommends some extremely obscure and somewhat controversial hentai. I recommend that you don't go too far down this rabbit hole. You may lose your sanity as well.
I have seen the light, Mr. CDawgVA. This podcast is a cesspit their taste and moral fiber are lacking. It is not the kind of media I want my impressionable audience to consume. Thank you for bringing this to my attention. I will warn my fans to not watch or listen to the podcast. I cannot, in good conscience, allow my fans to be tainted by the likes of this podcast. I will let my fans know about the better podcasts out there like yours.
Yes! Yes!